Thank you. Mr. Vice President, distinguished members of the Human Rights Council, Excellencies, it's a pleasure to address the Council for the fourth time. Let me be frank. I never imagined the day would come where my mandate would deem it necessary to prepare a report affirming that the words women and girls refer to distinct biological and legal categories, and that their female sex is central not only to the definition as categories of humans, but also central to the understanding of the discrimination and violence that they experience as subordinated classes. The consequences of this blatant disregard of the material reality of sex have been devastating. The erosion of women and sex-specific language, the conflation of sex, gender, and gender identity have produced flawed data, overall weakened protections for motherhood, women and girls, including lesbians, as well as women who do not identify as women, and girls who may be experiencing gender dysphoria. It has also obscured the correct understanding of current and emerging forms of violence against women and girls, and exposed women and girls to more violence, and undermined our ability to provide targeted and relevant services and assistance to all victims. Simply put, you cannot protect what you cannot define. To make this point clear, I have included in the report emerging or overlooked forms of violence that women and girls specifically experience because of their female biological sex. These include the hidden scourge of suicides linked to domestic violence, sex selection before birth, the use of femicide and reproductive violence as tools of genocide, and digitally facilitated forms of violence. The visceral reaction I received from some corners in response to this work single-handedly proved the necessity of this report. Several influential actors actively lobbied others not to engage with a call for input for this report. Some international and regional organizations, influence groups, and governments have called me regressive, racist, colonial, transphobic, fascist, and Nazi for this and other positions that I have had. Though these attacks have been relentless, I am aware that they represent only a fraction of what many other women and girls go through, often at great personal costs. In recent years, I have received concerning reports from countless women and girls and their allies in which they detail how they have been vilified, ostracized, threatened, and attacked for arguing that sex and sex-related data matter in the analysis of discrimination and inequality. They have lost their jobs, positions, and support for defending language for or about women. Scientists and biologists have been attacked for asserting what science tells us, that sex is as binary as it gets, and that it is real. Medical doctors, politicians, whistleblowers, and women human rights defenders have received death threats for pointing out the harms of socially and medically transitioning vulnerable children, including girls, who have a right to the highest standards of physical and mental health, and whose care must always be guided by their best interest and the best available evidence. Those that felt scandalized by what they read in the report, claiming that the recognition of biological differences between males and females is a mere belief or an outdated regressive stereotype that has no place in 2025, must be reminded that international law recognizes that women and girls are female and that they are protected against discrimination based on their female sex. They must be reminded that sex underpins the very definition of gender-based violence, as gender is a social meaning given to biological sex differences, which in turn results in the subordination of women to men in most contexts. And that to combat sexism and other stereotypes, we must recognize that sex differences exist and that subordination based on gender must be eliminated. Let me be clear. Erasing women and women-specific language and needs based on their sex is not only wrong, it is demeaning, it is regressive, and constitutes one of the worst forms of violence against women and girls that they can experience. It is the final nail in the coffin, and a brutal culmination of the global push to subjugate, control, and commodify women and girls under the false pretense that they can consent to their own exploitation and abuse. And nothing exemplifies the total disregard for the lives of half of the Earth's population as the situation of women and girls in times of war and occupation. The total collapse of the protections they are entitled to under international humanitarian and human rights law is alarming, and so is the apathy of the international community. The scale, depravity, and intensity of these crimes that are being committed against women and girls is so immense, it's so unprecedented, particularly in Palestine, that the current vocabulary that we have at our disposal to define these crimes does not do justice to them. What I'm proposing in my report is very simple, yet necessary. That we go back to basics, that we reclaim the meaning and relevance of sex, that we stop conflating terminologies such as sex, gender, and gender identity, that we acknowledge the centrality of sex in shaping the experiences of women and girls, men and boys, and that we ensure that states and non-state actors, including institutions, fulfill their duties towards the female half of the world's population, namely that they can enjoy safety, equality, and dignity. I also propose in my short addendum that states clarify and standardize the application of the concept of consent in contexts of violence against women to better protect victims and ensure accountability under international human rights law. The divergent interpretation and application of consent in national legislations, plus limitations and concerns I have found, deserve a closer analysis. I will be providing that detailed report with policy recommendations to support states in developing robust legal standards on the application of consent before the end of 2025. To conclude, after overcoming the initial disbelief that a report of this nature was needed, my only regret is that I did not write this report sooner. Far too much time has been spent by women defending their existence. That time could and should have been invested in advancing their rights, participation, and access to resources available to them to achieve equality. Enough is enough. Turning now to the country visits I conducted in 2024, I now have the pleasure of presenting the reports of the visits I conducted to the United Kingdom and the United Arab Emirates. First of all, I wish to express my deep appreciation to the government of the United Arab Emirates and all stakeholders I met with for their excellent cooperation. The UAE government went out of its way to accommodate my specific interests and requests in the mission schedule, for which I am very grateful. In this regard, I wish to acknowledge that the United Arab Emirates has made remarkable advancement in promoting equality between men and women and providing violence against women and girls. Such progress has been possible in large parts through the strong political commitment at the highest level and significant progress in women's political and economic participation, with gender parity in parliament and increased female leadership in government. It also earmarked significant funds towards meeting the needs of women and children in crisis settings and humanitarian settings. To consolidate these gains and address persisting gaps, I have recommended to the UAE that it ratify remaining key international treaties, expressly criminalize femicide, female genital mutilation, child marriage and marital rape, and remove reconciliation requirements in domestic violence cases. I have also advised the UAE to expand protection and support services to all women, regardless of nationality, strengthen data collection and accountability mechanism, reform personal status law and nationality laws to ensure full equality, and adopt an abolitionist model on prostitution to protect and support exploited women and girls. I also wish to thank the government of the United Kingdom, the devolved governments for their constructive engagement, as well as all stakeholders I met with during the visit. The United Kingdom has been a pioneer in its attempts to address different and emerging forms of violence against women and girls as they arise, such as on coercive control and online violence. I very much welcome the commitment of the current government to halve violence against women and the recent Supreme Council Court's decision on affirming the biological definition of sex for legal purposes, which must be implemented in full. The UK's efforts remain, however, are prevented from reaching their full potential by systemic fragmentation of policies on prevention and response, severe underfunding of frontline services, chronic court delays, and an immigration regime that does not sufficiently protect migrant and refugee women. To address these gaps, I have recommended that the UK adopt a unified, adequately resourced national strategy grounded in rights and intersectionality, ensuring the most vulnerable and marginalized women and girls are not left behind, such as women with disability, minoritized women, and migrant and refugee women. Women and other frontline organizations must continue to be adequately funded, must be able to participate in all processes that affect them. I urge also specific action to protect girls by expanding protections against grooming and online exploitation and ensuring justice systems respond swiftly and sensitively to the violence they face. I remain committed to support both governments in the follow-up to these visits and will be meeting with them at the margins of this session to discuss the details. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.